Beatles were the 60s, Abba were the 70s.
Perhaps at the time they were, maybe even underrated as a live band because one, they didn't do it so much and they didn't seem to get such a kind of buzz out of doing it. But at times they did some wonderful live performances.
They were performers from a sort of a background of more kind of, not classical, but more kind of stagey. They weren't from a really sort of dirty, grubby rock and roll background.
That was the glorious sound and spectacle of Abba live in performance. From spectacular moments like that, it's hard to comprehend that Abba never really thought of themselves as a live band. Yet, despite the fact that they saw themselves primarily as a studio machine, Abba remain one of the most spectacular and memorable live bands in pop history. The image of the 4 band members on stage in a variety of specially designed costumes has remained ingrained in the memory long after the group themselves disbanded. In fact, the image of Abba in performance has become so iconic that they unwittingly started the trend for the legions of tribute bands like Bjorn Again, who earn a living from reproducing Abba's stage show to audiences who never got the chance to see Abba in concert. Abba were less reticent when it came to performing for the television cameras, and we are fortunate that there are a large number of surviving performances which demonstrate just how good the band could be on stage. In this film review, we take a critical look at some of Abba's finest surviving live appearances on TV and explore how they developed from keen and eager pop stars in the mid-70s to the sophisticated, mature performers they became in the early 80s. Abba sprang to international prominence in 1974 by winning the Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo, and it was soon obvious that the band would need to tour outside their native Sweden if they were to build on that success. But their first attempts at playing live concerts were beset with difficulties, mainly caused by the high standards the band had set themselves in the recording studio. For those reasons, Abba preferred to promote their music via TV appearances. Television studios enabled them to recreate their music in similar conditions to a recording studio. They were not keen on miming, but they would agree to sing live to a pre-recorded instrumental backing tape.
In the studio they had the benefit of multi-tracking and using all kind of devices like vari-speed and stuff, and that was difficult to do live, and that was something that I'm sure that Benny and Bjorn had problems with when they did their concerts, so they had to then bring in backing vocalists and extra guitar players and percussionists and so forth just to get that Abba sound happening.
It was a studio created sound. It was something that they'd painstakingly gone about to create, in a sense to recreate something of the kind of Beach Boys sound, the Beatles sound, which was, and particularly in both those cases, the bands became less live bands and more studio bands. And I think that was Abba's idea, was to create something close to a perfect pop sound. So kind of Benny and Bjorn, working with their producer Michael B. Tretow, consciously set out to create this slick sound, multi-layered sound, something like this Phil Spector wall of sound idea, and that was just almost impossible to recreate live. Certainly at the time. I think nowadays there'd be no problem using kind of tape back to add that depth of sound to the sound, but at the time you just almost couldn't do it.
I think they were trying to replicate exactly what they'd done in the studio, simply because that was what people would have expected.
The film record of Abba in performance really starts with the band's 1975 performance on the German TV show Musikladen, promoting their SOS single. It was this song that heralded Abba's golden era of hits that would continue unabated for the next 7 years. One of the earliest performances of SOS, this German TV spot features Agneta and Annefrid in their famous cat costumes, designed for them in Sweden by Uwe Sandström. The two cats, a yellow dragon cat for Frida and a blue cat for Agneta, based on the designer's own pet Burmese cats, were hand-painted and decorated with rhinestones to make them sparkle.
Abba's costumes are legendary, and the way they dressed is a source of much hilarity in this 21st century. But of course, in the 70s, it didn't seem as ridiculous as it does now. Perhaps they were still flamboyant, they were still loud. They came along just after the sort of glam rock era had happened and blossomed, and they moved on from that through the disco period. So there's some very flamboyant clothes.
The group are singing to a pre-recorded instrumental backing tape, but the vocal performance is live, and the confident vocal delivery by Agneta and Annefrid, particularly on the chorus, gives the song a harder edge than the record and proves that these were genuinely talented performers.
Where are those happy days? They seem so hard to find. I tried to reach for you, but you have closed your mind.
On TV, Abba sometimes, in the early days, played to backing tapes perhaps, or sang to backing tapes. As their career progressed, and certainly as it turned, the 70s became the 80s, and they were doing shows after their final album, they tended to play live more because they were more experienced musicians. They were always pretty experienced, but now they were really consummate, experienced musicians.
Benny and Bjorn were great perfectionists. They were kind of known for this in the record in the studio. They were very kind of slavish, absolute kind of like, you know, pedantic. They were going for the detail and wanted to get things absolutely perfect. And they would do these retaking a tremendous number of vocal retakes, going over and over again. And when it came to live performance, they had one chance, and they knew that they wanted to get as close to it as possible. But I think they found it very frustrating that they couldn't.
Certainly, Abba, I think initially they were very much a live band, but for various reasons, I would say some personal kind of reasons, I think they then went on to becoming more of a promotional kind of band, or let's say a studio band, promoting their singles via television, because thanks to a Queen probably having Bohemian Rhapsody being such a major song shown on video, and therefore paving the way for a lot of other bands to release their singles using television as the medium. I think they then realised that this was the best way to sell the band, especially in the markets where they hadn't had much success, like Japan and America. So they then realised it was such a powerful marketing tool. We saw them a lot more on television.
So if you're near me, darling, can't you hear me? SOS. And the love you gave me, nothing else can save me. SOS. When you're gone, how can I even try to go on? When you're gone, though I tried, how can I carry on? When you're gone, how can I even try to go on?
A couple of months later in 1975, Abba performed SOS once more on the acclaimed American comedy show Saturday Night Live. Again, they were singing live to a pre-recorded backing track, but this time they had to compete with the show's zany sense of humour. The set that was made for Abba's performance of SOS was designed to resemble a deck on the Titanic. During the performance, guest actor Robert Klein, who is dressed as the ship's captain, is repeatedly seen trying to plug a leak on the boat with a newspaper. Abba's Saturday Night Live spot is widely regarded as a crucial part in getting SOS into the American Top 20, although they never achieved the same level of success in America as they did everywhere else in the world.
Where are those happy days? They seem so hard to find. I tried to reach for you, but you have closed your mind.
Abba didn't have the same degree of success in America as they did in the rest of the world, certainly in Europe. And I think partly due to the fact that they weren't really pigeonholed in America. They weren't a country band. They weren't a rock band. They were something else. They were Europop, which the Americans didn't really understand.
I think that people are a bit unfair and people misremember. I mean, they did have number one. They had one number one hit single, and they had other million-selling singles, so that they were successful. What they didn't, what you always have to do in America is tour, and it's just a tradition. You have to tour and tour and tour, and keep going back and back. And by that stage, in the late 70s, they really didn't like the touring. Particularly Agneta wanted to be at home. She was kind of a homebody by that stage. She had a terrible fear of flying. So they were successful. They weren't as successful as elsewhere, and they weren't prepared to put in the work that you traditionally have to put in to break America.
Not surprisingly, Abba were more relaxed on TV back in their native Sweden. In October 1976, they starred in a Swedish TV special called Abba Dabba Doo to coincide with the release of their Arrival album. The Arrival album featured 3 chart-topping hits including Dancing Queen, Knowing Me, Knowing You and Money, Money, Money. But for this TV show, they chose to perform a couple of the album's lesser-known tracks live in the studio.
Frida hated Dum Dum Diddle, a title which I can barely say without chuckling, a dreadful title, representative of early ABBA when they were still sort of doing a nursery rhyme kind of thing. It's surprising that they're performing it live, really, because Frida hated it. Even Bjorn, who wrote it, admitted that he'd bunged the lyrics together, you know, at the last minute when some lyrics were needed for a tune that they had. So it's surprising that they're doing it live here, because famously none of them really liked it.
I think ABBA evolved over the years to be good at presenting themselves on television. They initially just went for, I mean, the film clips are great fun, but then when they realised that they had to show themselves as being a live band, which was very important back in the 70s and the 80s, I think then they took particular attention to how they were perceived on television. So they brought in their studio engineers to work in the television studio to recreate that sound, and also their vision people, I suppose, to make sure they looked right on television.
I'm sure they felt that if they had created a hit record, what's the point of trying to change it when you play it live? I think that people would say if they were unable to recreate live what they had done in the studio, that they were less of a proper musical act. And they always managed to do it, I think.
The second live song on Abba Dabba Doo featured Bjorn on lead vocals rather than the girls. Why Did It Have to Be Me could be described as a glam rock version of a Fats Domino-styled song, with the girls adding their distinctive sound on the chorus. The band also showcased another of clothes designer Uwe Sandstrom's costumes, this time wearing the elegant silk kimonos that he had designed for them. And right at the end of the performance, you can see one of the first appearances of the new ABBA logo, with the reverse letter B that was soon to become their trademark and a crucial part of their image.
When you were lonely, needed a man.
Why Did It Have to Be Me is not one of ABBA's golden classics, and chiefly because it's one of the guys singing. And of course, the ABBA golden classics, you have to have the two girls singing, harmonising, the two guys as bookends, working as a unit, working as a team. That's what they do best. They're an unstoppable machine when they're a team. When you've got one of the guys singing, it could be Chas and Dave, it could be any old pub band.
Well, the visual image of ABBA was a big part of their success. Their manager, Stickan Andersson, I think was able to stand back and have a good look at the band and kind of fundamentally understand what the band needed, initially to win Eurovision and then to go on beyond there. And they have such a fantastic, iconic look about them. You've got a dark-haired girl, blonde-haired girl, guy with a beard, guy without a beard. And they all were represented as being of a similar kind of height. If you look at their video clips, they're all even. And so there was a great deal of symmetry about the band as well. And I think that was probably capped off when the logo of the B in ABBA was reversed. So symmetrically it was, 2 and 2 and 4.
You tend to get the two girls down centre stage and the two guys as sort of bookends. You get a little bit of interaction, but not as much perhaps as you would in more sort of decadent rock and roll shows of the time, or even disco shows. They were still a little bit sort of formal and a little bit sort of family entertainment. They never kind of got down like perhaps other people of the time were.
Less than a month after their Abba Dabba Doo show, ABBA were back in America, appearing on the prestigious midnight special show for NBC television in October 1976. Their first song was Fernando, which had just entered the American charts and would go on to reach number 13, their highest position since Waterloo 3 years earlier. A Swedish band singing a Latin-flavoured song wearing Japanese-style kimonos on an American TV show? What's that all about?
You were humming to yourself and softly strumming your guitar. I could hear the distant drums and sounds of bugle calls were coming from afar.
There is a thing that ABBA will they would toss anything into the mix. I think that they loved all styles of music. They were not afraid to make themselves look ridiculous in public if it would get them some attention. They adopted all kinds of musical styles. I think there was part of that was that they were genuinely interested in all kinds of music, and I think they were very pragmatic in selling themselves. They were something. They were an internationalist group. If you look at all their credits over the years, there's so many kind of Latin touches. There's French, and they did that. They were very pragmatic. Their manager Stig Andersson was working with Bjorn. They were very ambitious, so they wouldn't miss a trick in selling anything. So yeah, fusion, international fusion.
There's no regret. If I had to
When you get Abba wearing kimonos while singing sort of a Spanish story about Fernando, that's indicates that sort of it was the mid-70s and a lot of people were wearing kimonos, particularly after the sort of glam rock David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust period where kimonos became very, very, well, not very fashionable, but one or two sort of daring characters were wearing them. So Abba, again, a couple of years behind everyone else, decided to be daring. Then when you get them singing about Fernando, they did quite a few sort of Latin American, Spanish themed songs. No one's quite sure why. It just seems that Bjorn and Benny had had a couple of good holidays in Spain and Mexico and liked to write stories inspired by these places. More than once they went on holiday, a sort of working holiday together when they needed to write new material, and came back with songs like that, songs like Hasta Mañana. But Fernando obviously was most successful and was a massive #1 hit.
Abba returned to America a year and a half later to appear as special guests on Olivia Newton-John's TV show Olivia in May 1978. Benny remembers the show as not just one of the most important shows that Abba played in America, but also one of the most enjoyable. Not only did they get a chance to put their music across to some 30 to 40 million viewers, but those viewers got a chance to see the intimate side of Abba. During their informal get-together, they sang spontaneous versions of the Beach Boys' Barbara Ann and Elvis Presley's Jailhouse Rock. And Annifrid even sang a short burst of classical opera.
Ba 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 Barbara Ann, ba 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 Barbara Ann, ba 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 Barbara Ann, ba 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 ba. You got me rocking and rolling, rocking and reeling, Barbara Ann, ba ba.
Una voce poco fa, si
When it came to their own spot, Abba not surprisingly chose to sing Dancing Queen, which had been their first and, as it turned out, only #1 single in America the previous year. By now, Abba were a consummate live act, having undertaken a world tour during 1977 that would result in the film Abba the Movie. And the relaxed surroundings of the show brought out the best in them. They're clearly enjoying themselves immensely and make a faultless segue into Fernando midway through.
I don't think any of them particularly relished the idea of touring. By the time they'd hit it big, they'd all been in the music business for 10 years, so I think they'd kind of done it already, and they knew that it was a very pragmatic approach. They didn't hate it; they loved music, but I think that it was always a kind of pragmatic idea that you tour, you do it in order to, get big, which is absolutely what they wanted to do.
I think ABBA's 1977 live tour was a turning point for ABBA because they realised what had to be done in order to portray themselves as a bona fide live touring act. And so they learnt a lot about how they should sound and look on screen.
It was a necessary evil that they had to do this tour. They had to prove, as has been said, that they could do it live. And I think it was hard work for them because, once again, leaving young children and that kind of thing.
the drums, Fernando. I remember long ago, another starry night like this.
They made a big effort to get close to the studio sound, so they got the best equipment they did. It was a slog for Abba. It was a big tour, took in a lot of countries, and I think they pushed themselves, and they did as that was as good as they were going to get. I think pretty much. 79 they were good too, but it improved them. They were technically better by the end.
They were shining there for you and me, for liberty, Fernando. No, we never thought that we could lose. There's no regret. If I had to do the same again, I would, my friend Fernando. Yes, if I had to do the same again, I would, my friend Fernando.
ABBA's other performance on Olivia's show was Take a Chance on Me. The song was released in America to coincide with a TV show and subsequently rose to number 3, giving ABBA their biggest US hit since Dancing Queen.
Take a chance on me. If you need me, let me know. Gonna be around. You got no place to go when you're feeling down.
I think Take a Chance on Me is one of several excellent pieces where the backing vocals are, or the counterpoint vocals are an important part of the success of the record.
Bjorn wrote Take a Chance when he was jogging one day. The rhythm of him running along the footpath gave him that rhythm of take a chance, take a chance, take a chance. And so then that inspired him to use that, the vocal part of that song, as a kind of a rhythmic instrument, really. So you hear that in 3 parts of the song. They reintroduce that part later on and towards the end of the song as well. So it gives it an interesting kind of feel. It's a different approach to songwriting to use a vocal as a rhythmic instrument.
It's very intricate. It starts with one thing, and the vocals also kind of echo and propel the rhythm as well. Benny and Bjorn have thought about the rhythm, thought how can we accentuate this with the vocal technique, and it's very, very cleverly done. It's a little bit music hall, but it has so much energy that it pumps along brilliantly anyway, and it's a very hard song not to love.
At the end of 1978, ABBA flew out to Japan to record a 1-hour TV special that featured the band playing a selection of their greatest hits, some of which they mimed while others were performed live. The production of the show was lavish, particularly on the opening sequence, which had ABBA premiering Eagle from their forthcoming album, ABBA the Album. And for their performance of Dancing Queen, the band, who were wearing bright, sparkling costumes, were surrounded by a troupe of Japanese dancers. Not all the attempts to bridge the culture gap between Japan and Sweden were successful. They performed Knowing Me, Knowing You in bright white costumes, surrounded by colourful balloons, a somewhat inappropriate setting for a song that deals lyrically with the breakup of a romance. And for Summer Night City, the group were reduced to a quarter of the screen, while footage from what appeared to be a tourist advertisement for Stockholm occupied the rest of the screen. There were no such problems when it came to their live performance of Money, Money, Money. Annie Frid is in particularly fine form as she guides the band through the song, which is given a lush orchestral backing.
Work all night, I work all day to pay the bills I have to pay. 80 cents, and still it never seems to be a single penny left for me. That's too bad.
It's hard to explain why ABBA was so popular in Japan and the Far East, although they did kind of go for that part of the world. They went for Australia and Japan and the East. Maybe people just hadn't seen much like them before, or maybe they were a kind of an accessible version of glam pop. You know, the wilder things had come along, and then a year or two later along come ABBA, a little bit toned down, you know, not quite transsexual and camp and all that.
Money, 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 always sunny in the rich man's world. All the things I could do if I had a little money. It's a rich man's world.
I think that without kind of going too heavily into cultural stereotypes, but I think that there's something about the kind of clean image that ABBA projected, which went down very well in Japan, and I think the kind of clean, the idea of their clean sound was big.
Like that is hard to find, I can't get him off my mind. Ain't it sad? If he happens to be free, I bet he wouldn't fancy me. That's too bad. So I must leave. I'll have to go to Las Vegas or Monaco. And we don't want to leave again. My life will never be the same. Money, money, money must be funny in the rich man's world. Money, 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 always sunny in the rich man's world.
So if we see ABBA on the Japanese ABBA special, they went for an almost fully orchestrated sound. There's not many of their normal live musicians. I would expect that probably they've got their normal drummer and bass player, and that's kind of it. It sounds very heavily orchestrated, but that's quite different to the Dick Cavett show sound. If you listen very closely, Dick Cavett's show, the sound that they got on that was, I think, much closer to their original recordings, but, you know, with a bit of an edge to it.
All the things I could do if I had a little money. It's a rich man's world.
ABBA's last live concert together was in April 1981 for a TV special filmed in Sweden called Dick Cavett Meets ABBA. Cavett was a legendary American talk show host and was specially chosen by ABBA, who wanted to combine talk and music into one show. ABBA hadn't toured in over a year, and the two couples that made up the group were now separated. But the interview was relaxed. In fact, it was more of a conversation than an interview, which was just what the band had been hoping for. As the interview drew to a close, the curtains behind them opened to reveal the band striking up the charming riff that heralds Gimme Gimme Gimme, the hit that had set dance floors buzzing around the world in late 1979. With Agneta taking the lead vocals, the pulsating bass and drums, the driving guitars and harsh-sounding voices on the chorus make the song rock even harder than the record.
ABBA turned to the disco market around about the time of Gimme Gimme Gimme, which was recently adopted by Madonna for the Hung Up hit, of course. And they did quite well, and this was around the time of the Voulez-Vous album, which was their disco album pretty much. Very good album, very well produced. They took elements of disco, but kept obviously their songwriting skills. They didn't just go for a beat, they kept their swooping choruses and great build-ups, great middle eights, great vocal overlayings. And it worked very well.
Abba once said, after a review in a music paper accused them of being a disco act, that was the way, it was the soundtrack for that period, which was the second half of the 70s. And I suppose in many ways there's a truth in that. I don't know that they aimed at making a disco record, but that was the trend.
They liked the idea of disco, they liked the sound, they liked the Giorgio Moroder sound, and they tried to recreate it. The first time, their big disco thing was almost by chance when they set about writing Dancing Queen. It was a song about someone who liked dancing, and it was almost by chance that they realised they'd written a great and kind of an enduring classic, camp, gay, kitsch, iconic disco song. Once they'd written that, then that inspired them.
The song comes to a stirring climactic finish, but even as the last chord fades away, Agneta and Annifrid have switched seamlessly into the opening a cappella harmonies of Super Trouper, the band's most recent hit from the end of 1980. This time, Annifrid takes the lead vocals above the song's dazzling array of counter melodies and harmonies and brings an added impetus to the song.
Like I always do, 'cause somewhere in the crowd there's you.
It wasn't so much that they were hugely embraced by the disco market, it just meant that they were accepted by the disco market and it gave them another string to their bow. It was enough of a change to keep them sounding fresh after several albums, but it wasn't so much of a radical change that it put off their traditional audience. It didn't scare anyone away. You know, it wasn't like they went punk rock or death metal or something. They were still ABBA, but they had disco rhythms as opposed to kind of musical, you know, oompa rhythms, which they've sometimes been guilty of in their early days.
After a break, ABBA return with a couple of songs that they've been recording for their next album, The Visitors, which would be released at the end of 1981. Bjorn takes the lead on this amusing ditty about a man answering an advertisement from two girls in the personals column who turn out to be mother and daughter. It was certainly a lightweight contrast to the more serious subject matter that predominated on The Visitors album.
But they had nothing to say, at least not until the day something specially rare. This is what they say.
Two for the Price of One is one of Bjorn's most embarrassing songs, perhaps. It's kind of, perhaps they're running out of ideas for material by now, but it's a song about how he has a threesome with a mother and a daughter. And therefore gets two for the price of one, which is hardly the most witty song you've ever heard and not something you kind of expect from a family entertainment band like ABBA. So it's a curious song. It's curious to see them doing it live here because you always assume it's one of those album tracks that got sort of buried as a filler. And it just seems that perhaps he likes to have a controversial song in there every now and again, like Does Your Mother Know?, which it ties in with very, very nicely, and which was equally gauche and a little bit naff.
He called the number and a voice said Alice Whiting. The voice was husky and it sounded quite exciting. He was amazed at his luck, the purest streak of gold he'd struck. He said, I read your ad, it sounded rather thrilling. I think a meeting could be mutually fulfilling. Why don't we meet for a chat, the three of us?
I don't think they really understood what they were saying. Once again, we're talking about perhaps their incomplete command of English to a certain extent. They probably didn't realise quite how far they were going with that one. I mean, Two for the Price of One is just a joke song, really. And it sounds like it was in some kind of dubious musical.
but you'll be certain when you meet my mother.
The second song from the as yet unreleased album The Visitors features Agneta singing her ex-husband Bjorn's lyrics about their daughter growing up and going to school. And it's not surprising that Agneta sings the song with a depth of feeling. In fact, there's more poignancy about this live version than would be evident on the album version.
With an absent-minded smile.
As the 70s moved on, Abba got more and more confident and more successful, obviously, and the more successful they got, the more confident they got. But by the sort of the 80s, they were doing more experimental stuff. The Visitors album was quite ambitious for them and not as commercial as their previous works. So they were doing more experimental stuff on some of this footage we see here by their standards. It doesn't, you know, it's not experimental by avant-garde standards, but it's experimental by pop standards. And they moved past disco, they were doing quite Baroque ballads again now.
Slipping through my fingers all the time, I try to capture every minute. Now feeling in it, slipping through my fingers all the time. Do I really see what's in my mind? Each time I think I'm close to knowing. She keeps on growing, slipping through my fingers all the time.
At their best, they had the pop songs, which were about the kind of what was happening in their lives. And I think that's when ABBA were at their best. And now I think they're their enduring songs. They're songs about, you know, despair, about marriages ending, and about, I think, Slipping Through My Fingers is one of their best songs, because it's absolutely, it's from the heart. It's a confessional song about Bjorn saying he's worried about, he's given too much energy to his work and too little to his, you know, family, and then he's seeing his children grow up, and it's a really heartbreaking song.
It just became very hard for them to write happy love songs, and it did reflect that they were growing up to a certain extent, or had grown up, and that the dream was over. They couldn't do it anymore because it wouldn't be realistic. They just had to put an end to it, which of course is what they did.
Slipping through my fingers all the time. Do I really see what's in her mind? Each time I think I'm close to knowing. She keeps on growing, slipping through my fingers all.
Annifrid is back in the spotlight for Me and I, an underrated ABBA song from the Super Trouper album about wrestling with your conscience. It features some smart lyrics, and the simple rock treatment the song is given by the band works better than the elaborately arranged album version.
Me and I is a curious song because it's about schizophrenia, so they're actually being very clever with their use of language there, and what looks like the worst title ever written. Frida sings it with real passion, and there's some strange lyrics about Jekyll and Hyde and Dr. Freud and so forth. Again, it's a kind of a weirder, darker song than people normally would associate with ABBA, which occasionally they would do. It's very representative of their later period, where perhaps because they'd done pop, they'd tried everything they could, they were getting into some weird tangents now and again, which makes the last album very interesting.
It was pretty easy to tell from ABBA's lyrics that they weren't from England. They were definitely Swedish, and I think they kind of played up on this a little bit. They wanted the world to see that they were Swedish. I think they were quite proud of it, and I think there was a kind of an innocence that went with their songwriting and their lyrics, and they tended to use lyric as an interesting sort of way of telling the story in terms of repetition. A lot of their songs, they would just repeat the main lyric. Ring, ring, for example, money, money, money. And that worked very well for them. But I think certainly the way they phrased the songs as well, and their enunciation kind of gave it away. You just knew that they weren't from England, that it was certainly a European kind of sound.
I think Annie Fried was actually quite keen on being an actress, a film star, that sort of thing, and a very good example of that is in this song called Me and I, which before I saw the footage you have of it, I could not even recognise. I don't think I'd ever seen that before, and it's a theatrical piece, and I think that's really what Annie Fried was quite keen on doing.
On and On proves that ABBA can rock with the best of them. A track from the Super Trouper album, ABBA really let their hair down, driven on by a thumping beat and jangling guitars that add for more spice and bite than the album version.
On and On is one of their most relatively most rocking tracks on these performances. They do get down and get on it a little bit with this one. It was one of the later songs, obviously, from one of the later albums, and it does have more vim and vigour, perhaps, than their more precise and polite ballads. It still wouldn't get on the bill at Donington. It's not a monster of rock track by any stretch of the imagination, but at least they're kind of getting a few feet tapping and working it a bit.
There's two drummers in this song, and a thumping bass line, and some pretty heavy-duty guitar work as well. So I think it's them trying to say that they're not just writing boppy songs, poppy songs, nor just ballads. They had a rock and roll side to them as well.
It's time for a classic ABBA hit, and they don't get much more classic than Knowing Me, Knowing You. When it originally came out in 1977, it was hailed as a triumph of ABBA's maturity. And even though the lyrics were about the end of a relationship, at the time ABBA was definitely still two couples. Now sung with hindsight, the song carries an irresistible poignancy.
Certainly Knowing Me, Knowing You is one of their finest songs ever, if not their finest. And songs like that, and Slipping Through My Fingers, where they're perhaps being more candid, the lyrics are more candid about their own interrelationships, are very beautiful songs, and it's what ABBA do best. Certainly more convincing than things like Does Your Mother Know and Two for the Price of One, where they just look a bit awkward and embarrassing. Knowing Me, Knowing You is perhaps might stand up as their greatest song of all.
When Knowing Me, Knowing You was released, and he was asked, Bjorn was asked, is this a kind of an autobiographical song? And he just said, no, it's just an image that he had of someone walking through a house once a relationship was over, and it just struck him. And then years later, 23 years later, he was asked the same question, and then then he said, actually, it was a song about the breakup of his marriage. But neither of those answers was very accurate, because in fact, he wrote it 3 years before his marriage did break up. But it's odd that he finally did come to accept that he was writing confessional, autobiographical songs, and they were, I think, ABBA at their best when there was a kind of a real honesty and a depth to, that underpinned very, very good pop music.
Knowing me, knowing you, there is nothing we can do. Knowing me, knowing you, we just have to face it this find a way through. Breaking up is never easy, I know, but I have to go. Knowing me, knowing you.
Summer Night City is one of ABBA's most stirring songs, but Benny and Bjorn were never completely satisfied with the recording first made in 1978 and continually revised it. This live version restores the slow piano and vocal-led introduction that was originally edited out. The contrast between the pensive opening and the driving disco beat that propels the rest of the song adds some vivid dynamics and gives it a real lift.
ABBA did have a rather restless quest for perfection. A good example is Summer Night City, where they recorded various versions of that. They had a piano vocal intro, which was it was used in their live performances, but we didn't see that in the recorded performance. And I understand that ABBA did have that process in their songwriting, that they would take what they'd written into the studio and work at it and work up different versions of a song, so that ultimately the version that they committed to tape would be exactly what they wanted.
A lot of people have a problem with Summer Night City. They think it's kind of it's one of their more indulgent tracks. It's trying to do too many things, but I've always had a soft spot for Summer Night City. A lot of people think it's overdone, it's overproduced. They're putting too much into it, but you know, it's the odd forgivable indulgence.
What better way to finish ABBA in performance than with Thank You for the Music? Even though the song scarcely qualifies as one of ABBA's greatest hits, it has come to be regarded as something of a signature tune for them.
Probably heard it before.
ABBA, Thank You for the Music.
But I have a talent, a wonderful thing, 'cause everyone listens when I start to sing. I'm so grateful and proud. All I want is to sing it out loud.
Thank You for the Music is generally thought of as a sort of an anthem, a theme. People think of that, they think of ABBA. If you're making a film or a book about ABBA, you tend to call it Thank You for the Music. And it's been covered many times. It's very easy sort of sing-along, the kind of thing Westlife or soap stars would do on a TV show. As to whether it's their best song, no, not by a long chalk, I'd say. It's a little bit corny. It's a lot corny, actually. It's a little bit saccharine. It's dripping with syrup. And it doesn't have any sort of beat or pop sexiness, which their better tracks do, such as Know Me, Knowing You or Dancing Queen.
And I've often wondered, how did it all start? Who found that nothing can capture a heart like a melody can? Well, whoever it was, I'm a fan. So I say thank you for the music, the songs I'm singing. Thanks for all the joy they're bringing. Who can live without it? I ask in all honesty. What would life be without a song? That's what I read. So I say thank you for the music, for giving it to me.
The chorus is such a perfect chorus that everybody must know that song and associate it with ABBA. And I suppose they are actually saying, we are grateful that we have been given this talent, and this is our way of proclaiming it to the world. It's a fabulous song. It really is. It's never been that big a hit, of course, but that's the way things go, isn't it? It's a great song, and yes, it is their signature tune. Can you think of another one? I can't.
Thank You for the Music, I think, is ABBA's signature tune. We play in Bjorn Again, that's our final encore song. And I think it kind of sums it up, really, for ABBA. Thank you for the music.